All right, here's a video tutorial on how to do your final cut. First of all, go onto our Blackboard page and find the feedback I gave you on your rough cut, because there's going to be some feedback that is specific to you and to your video that will be different from what I'm showing in this tutorial right here. What I'm going to show in this tutorial is changes that everyone can make to their videos regardless of the feedback I gave them. But I may have given you some feedback that's specific to your project, how it needs to be organized, some cuts you need to make, maybe it needs to be much shorter or much longer, things like that. I'm not going to get into those kinds of specifics in this video. Actually, for this video, I'm going to be looking at one group's project. I'll be looking at the Climb Iowa group, but it should give you everything you need to know. You can apply it to your own video pretty easily. So in your 5-folder setup, which is on your computer, it should look roughly the same as it did before, except now you have something in your exports folder. You've got your rough cut export there. Of course, you've got a projects folder, and you've got your Premiere project in there. Go ahead and open up that Premiere project, and you should see it right here. Okay, now in my Premiere project, I've got it opened up. I want to get to my project panel here on the left. Now remember that on the left here, you've got these panels here, and these panels all are just like tabs, right? So you might have multiple panels open. You might have a panel for your different camera angles or something like that. That's fine, you can have those open, but if you've got you want to find this first panel here called your project panel. And if you can't find it, you can go up to Window and then go up to Projects, and you should see a checkbox next to that option for your project panel. That's what I want to see. I also want to see my main sequence. It's called Rough Cut here on the right. You made multiple sequences when you did your project. You can go ahead and close the other sequences, so the only one that's open is your Rough Cut sequence. Now we're going to make some changes here, but before we do anything, we're going to make a final cut sequence. And to do that, we're just going to actually duplicate the sequence from our rough cut. So open up your sequences folder. Again, I'm in list mode, which means I can just do a little drop down here. I have my, my rough cut sequence here. That's what this one is. It says my Climb Iowa rough cut. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to duplicate this sequence. I'm just going to right click on it and choose duplicate. And now I've got one that's called Climb Iowa KC Rough Cut Copy 01. Now I'm going to change the name of this. I'm just going to click on the words once. And then I'm going to remove that part that says Copy 01. And I'm going to make this one called Final Cut. Now the reason I'm doing this is so that my rough cut stays intact. That way, if I really mess up something on my final cut, I can always go back to my rough cut. It's kind of like a checkpoint in a video game where you're kind of saving your progress. I'm going to open up this final cut sequence now just by double clicking on the icon right here, and that has opened up my final cut sequence. It's identical to my rough cut sequence. It has all the same connections, all the same footage, but I'm going to keep my rough cut one intact so that it's as if I haven't touched it. I'm going to go ahead and even close that sequence, so I've only got my final cut sequence here. Now I'm going to make some changes. We're going to start with color correction. And the kind of footage we're going to color correct first is our footage just our B-roll footage. So go ahead and find your first B-roll clip. Find the first B-roll clip that you recorded that's in your rough cut. Go ahead and click on that clip so it's highlighted, and then at the top left find Effect Controls, and you should see the effects that are on that by default. Effect Controls, again, it's one of the tabs that should be here. If you don't see it, just go to Window and find Effect Controls. Sometimes I have to highlight it again so I can see that here. What I can see is the default effects that are on every clip in Premiere: motion, opacity, time remapping, and there are some audio effects that are also there by default. I'm going to add another effect to this clip in order to do color correction. To do that, I need to go to my Effects rack, which is here at the bottom left. It's just called Effects. You might have a bunch of different tabs open here. You might have to navigate over here to the right a little bit to find it. If you don't see it at all, go to Window, click on Effects, and then it should show up here in the bottom left. The effect I'm going to add is an effect called Lumetri Color. Lumetri Color. I'm going to add this effect to that clip. When I add that effect, it doesn't do anything, right? It's just a way for me to add more effects later on. But up in my effects control panel, I will see, in addition to my default effects, I'm going to see this Lumetri Color effect. Everything you can do with Photoshop or with Lightroom, those basic corrections you can do in Photoshop, you can do with Lumetri Color. That's basically what we've done here. I'm just going to do my basic corrections here. My basic corrections here will allow me to adjust things like my temperature. I can make it cooler or warmer. I'm going to make this one a little bit cooler. I can adjust my tint, make it more magenta or more purple. You want to make it more true to life. And I can also adjust things like my exposure and my contrast. Now, one really important note, before you do any color correction, at all, really important note, turn up the brightness on your screen. So the brightness on your screen, the computer you're using, should be all the way turned up. Your brightness should be at 100%. It's going to hurt your eyes at first. I know a lot of you are used to using very, very low brightness on your screens. The native brightness on your screen is 100% fully bright. If you're doing this at a very low brightness, it's going to make your video look really weird on everyone else's screen but your own. So make sure your screen is turned all the way up to its full brightness, then come back and do your color correction. Okay, for this, I'm going to add a little bit of exposure, make it a little bit brighter. And I'm going to add a lot of contrast. Now, here's the thing. The cameras that I gave you, I actually already had them set up to a color profile that is very low contrast. The reason for that is because it's a lot easier to add contrast in post-production than it is to remove contrast from footage that is very contrasty already. So this is called, you're able to get a lot more dynamic range by doing this. So I'm adding quite a bit of contrast to my clips. I can also add or reduce contrast by working on my highlights and shadows. So I can do some shadow work here. This is kind of to your taste, but you can make these changes here just doing just the basic corrections under Lumetri Color. Now you can also look at a before and after. If you kind of want to see what this footage looked like before you started doing this and after, find your effect, and then you can see this little FX right here next to the effect. If I click this once, I can turn the effect off, and you can see a huge difference, right, between off and on. And that's one way you can disable effect if you don't want to have it there anymore. So that's a way to do a before and after. So I like the way this looks, and I'm going to move on to my next clip. I'm going to move my playhead over my next clip. I'm going to click on it to highlight it. I'm going to add my Lumetri Color effect to that clip, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go on my basic corrections here. I can mess with my temperature and tint if I want to. I can cool it off a little bit. I can brighten it a little bit with exposure. Don't go too crazy with this. I'm going to add some contrast. And again, I can just sort of, maybe I'll do some shadow work here, bring the shadows down slightly. And I can do a before and after to see what that looks like. You can see a huge difference there. I like the way that looks, and I'm going to keep going. You'll do this for every clip you have for B-roll. All of the footage needs to be color corrected because, again, the cameras were shooting at this very flat color profile. And to make the footage look as good as possible, it's all going to need at least a little bit of color correction. Now, I can make it a little bit easier because you can do some copying and pasting. Let's say I've got two clips that look pretty similar. This first clip looks pretty similar to this clip over here. Pretty similar color profile, pretty similar angle, what I'm seeing here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one that I like. I'm just going to right click and choose copy. And then I'm going to go to this clip over here. I'm going to highlight that clip. I'm going to do right click and do paste attributes. What I can do is I can paste this Lumetri Color effect from my other clip into this one. I just click OK. And now I've added that effect here. This is only going to work with footage that's pretty similar, right? I wouldn't be able to paste attributes into this clip right here because it was filmed outside and it's a totally different profile. It wouldn't look the same. But these two camera shots here, which are fairly similar, it's the same kind of thing. I can go ahead and do paste attributes there. And then if I want to fine tune it, I can still fine tune this individual clip here to fit kind of my taste. But that's one way you can save a little bit of time. All right, let's talk now about how to edit your multi-camera interview footage and how to do your color correction on your multi-camera interview footage. Right now, I have, my footage. It looks okay, but the same thing, it's very flat, and I can make it look a little bit more contrasty. But I'm actually not going to edit this right here the same way I edited these clips over here. Instead, I'm going to edit the sequences that are associated with this multi-camera sequence here. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go to my project panel here on the left. I'm going to open up my sequences panel. And when I created my multi-camera sequence for this interview, I actually created a separate sequence for each camera angle. I did a sequence for camera A, a sequence for camera B, and a sequence for camera C. Now, if when you filmed your project, you didn't film multi-camera interviews for your subjects, then yeah, you can just color correct just by adding the Lumetri Color effect to the clips directly in your sequence like this. But I think every group but one of you did your interview as a multi-camera interview, so you're going to want to follow these steps here. find in your sequences folder, find the sequence that you did for each camera angle, and just go ahead and double click on the icon to open up that sequence. So here is my camera A sequence. Here's how it looks right here. I can see, it's just the interview. And this is where I'm actually going to add that Lumetri color effect, is to these clips right here. I'm going to go to my effects rack again, find Lumetri color. I'm going to do just a basic correction here, edit the temperature, cool that down a little bit, bring the exposure up slightly, not too much, increase the contrast a little bit, maybe bring down the shadows. This is just my taste here. I'm going to take this effect that I just did here, and I'm going to copy it into the next clip over here because it wasn't added there. Do paste attributes. Boom. And now that footage has been edited. You can actually see over here, if I go to my main sequence now, if I go to my main Final Cut sequence here, that footage in my main sequence has been color corrected. Let me show you before and after. Let's go to my camera A. I'm going to go to my footage here. I will turn off that effect just so you can see that. And I'm going to go back to my Final Cut sequence. You can see that this footage is uncolor corrected. But if I go back to my camera A and I turn that effect on again and go back to my main Final Cut sequence, that footage is color corrected. That color correction carries over anywhere where I copied that multi-camera footage over to. So that's going to save me a lot of time. I don't need to color correct every single individual cut that I made to my multi-camera here. And that should save you a lot of stress. I will just want to do this for each camera angle. So I've done camera A, I've color corrected that. I can close that sequence. Going to go to camera B, open up that sequence. Again, I'm going to add my Lumetri color effect to this one. Just doing my basic corrections here. You know the drill. This doesn't really need much in exposure, but I do want to bring the shadows down. And then I will take this effect, do a paste attributes into this guy. And now I've color corrected camera B. And you'll see anywhere where camera B shows up has been color corrected. And then my camera C, if you have one, you'll color correct that as well. I'm just going to paste attributes from my camera A because it's very similar. I actually want to do a little more exposure with this one. There we go. Then copy that, paste attributes into there. You get the idea. So now all three of those camera angles have been color corrected. Anywhere where they show up in this Final Cut sequence, they will be color corrected there. That's going to save you, again, a lot of time and a lot of stress because you won't be color correcting every single little cut that you made to your multi-camera sequence as you were working on that interview. So that is the basics of our color correction. You've done the color correction here. So you'll color correct every clip that needs to be color corrected. You'll color correct your multi-camera sequence. You'll do a lot of paste attributes. That's totally fine. And your color correction will be pretty much done. Let's talk now about doing some sound mixing and adding some sounds here. In a previous class, I showed you how to use this tool. It's called freesound.org. It's a place where you can find royalty-free music. The music that you use for this video needs to be royalty-free. You can't just use your favorite songs because that can be copyright infringement. You need to have the rights to the song you use, or it needs to be royalty-free. Everything on Freesound is royalty-free. You just need to create a free account to use it. A lot of stuff here is not very good, or it's effects or things like that that are not relevant for you. But if you search for a genre of music, or even like an instrument, you'll usually find something good. I'm going to search hip-hop as a genre. And then I'm going to see a lot of like these 1 or 2 second loops. But to see actual songs, if I click advanced search options, and then under duration, choose at least 60, that's 60 seconds, then choose search. Then I will actually see like some longer songs. I'll see some actual, song type things here. So I can find a song that I might like. And let's see if there's one that I like here. Oh man, there's a lot of stuff I don't like, but if I keep looking, I'll eventually find something here. Let's see, I like the smoke one here. If I want this one, I can click on it, and then you can just download it. It's fairly simple. You just need to click on the track and choose download. So you can go ahead and just click this to download it. After you've downloaded it, you'll need to move that file from your downloads folder into your audio folder. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my browser here. I'm going to go into Finder. I've got my 5-folder setup open here. I've found that here. I'm going to go to File, New Finder window. So I get a second one of these gray windows here. When I saved that file from Freesound, it dropped it in this folder here called my Downloads folder. I'm going to click on this Downloads folder, and this track right here is that audio track that I just added. That track right here, it's got a really long name, and I'm just going to click and drag this into my audio folder in my 5-folder setup. Now that should be there. It's a track. If you want to rename it, you definitely can. I'm going to now move this over into my audio folder over here in my Premiere project just by clicking and dragging that into my audio folder. And now that track shows up here. If I want this to be like kind of background music underneath all of my other audio, I can definitely do that. And that's definitely a good idea to do. The main thing is, the main issue, the main error I see with people who do this is they mix the music too loud. My general rule of thumb is if you're a beginner, the background music under your video needs to be about half as loud as you think it needs to be. That music is not there for us to vibe to listen to. We shouldn't even really know the tune of it when we're done watching the video. It's just there to fill in empty space and kind of set the tone. First thing, I want to make sure I have enough audio tracks here. I have 3 audio tracks here, so I can just drop my music in this 3rd audio track. But if you've used these audio tracks for other things and you don't have a place to put this music, just right-click anywhere in the left-hand side of a track, and you have the option actually over here, kind of next to this microphone, and you can do add tracks, and you can add an audio track. You can also add a video track if you want to. I'm just going to add one audio track. Now I've got another one here, and just like last time, I'm going to expand it a little bit so it's a little bit bigger. I'm going to add this song in here. You can see just by looking at the waveforms that this song is going to be way louder than my other audio. If I take a listen, yeah, it's so loud. It's going to be extremely loud. But if I scroll down and I have expanded this audio track so it's big enough for me to see this horizontal bar right here, I can turn this down. I'm going to turn it down quite a bit. So I really don't need it to be very loud at all. Let's listen.
Village that can take your trip to new heights.
Okay, I'm going to turn it up just slightly here.
Climb Isle. Viewfinder producer and novice climber Anna Paul talked with gym director Logan Dirksen about the indoor climbing facility and fall.
And that sounds just fine. Not too loud, not too soft. That will be just fine there. Again, the main issue I see with people is they have the music too loud. The music is not there for us to vibe to. We should barely notice it there. And if the track that you chose is not long enough, so this track that I chose is about 1 minute long, which means it's not enough to cover the whole thing. That's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find my music track here in my project panel again. I'm just going to drag it somewhere over kind of before the end of the other one. So I've kind of got 2 of them here. Again, I'm going to make sure I remember to turn it down to the same level as the other one. And then to make sure that with this one crossing over to this one is not so obvious, I'm going to use an effect over here in Effects. The effect is called Crossfade. Doesn't matter which one of these you choose. I'm going to crossfade between these 2. That will make it less obvious when it moves from this one to this one here.
But also balancing the needs of the business to be profitable. We find that there's a sweet spot in there to have.
That's perfect. Okay, so you've got your music spliced into there in some way. That's a great thing to have. So that's how to add some music into your video. The next thing we want to do is learn how to add a lower thirds identifier. This is something you could put in your interview the first time a person, your guest, speaks. You want to have something to identify that person because you might not include them saying their name in the actual footage itself. Now, Premiere has a bunch of default lower thirds graphics that you can add very easily. So let me show you how to do that. You're going to go up to Window, and you're going to find this one here called Essential Graphics. It's going to open up this big panel over here on the right. And underneath Browse, you're going to see a bunch of different options for graphics you can add. And some of them are titles, some of them are lots of different things. This one here is called a basic lower third. I'm going to find a different one here. Let's see. You can add any of these. They're all really good options. I'll go ahead and go with, I'll go ahead and go with that basic lower third. You can change it if you want to. You can choose, there are different ones you can do. I'm going to take this basic lower third. I'm going to drag it. It's going to be in the video track above my main video track. It's going to show this guy's name, right? It says your name here. Second line is smaller. To edit this, I just click on it so it's highlighted. I go up to my Essential Graphics panel, find my edit tool here, and then I can replace this text where it says second line is smaller just by double clicking it. This second line is smaller. I can say Climb Iowa. It's the name of the, I could say manager. I don't remember what his title is. Then under your name here, if I double click on it, I can change that. This guy's name is Logan Dirksen. I think I spelled that right. I can also do some aligning here. I actually want this to be aligned over to the right. So under Align and Transform, I can do that with both of those layers. So it's aligned over to the right. And that looks just fine. I can change the opacity, so I can make it more or less opaque using this. I can move things around this way here. But I'm going to go ahead and keep that how that is. Now it's a little bit too far over to the right now. It's kind of like really hugging the edge of the clip here. I don't actually want that. I want to have a little bit of space. I want a little bit of padding on the right side. So I'm going to click on it. Then I'm going to go actually to my Effect Controls. And on Vector Motion, I'm going to click the drop down here. And then with Position, I'm going to use my Position Controls just to position this a little bit over to the right. Okay, that's going to show up just fine.
So
It'll
yeah,
just show his name.
Both do kind of our donations program where we will donate
And by default, that's going to be about 5 seconds long. Again, in Essential Graphics, there are other lower thirds you can add that have some motion to them that look kind of cool. You are free to use those if you want to. This basic one, this essential one, is the one that you'll see by default. Once you're done adding those lower thirds, just click on this little hamburger menu here, close that panel, and just make sure that lower third shows up the first time we see that person and hear that person speak. Okay, let's talk one more sound mixing thing here. Let's say that you've got some tracks that you want to sound a little bit quieter than others. Again, make sure your B-roll footage is turned down, so it's not overpowering any voice that you have over here. And then if you have some music that you want to kind of fine tune, you want to make it sound, maybe you don't want the whole track to be turned down, maybe you want it to be louder at the beginning or something like that. You can do that just by clicking on the audio track here, then going up to Effect Controls. Move your playhead over the area where you want to do maybe an effect where you have it fade down or fade up or something like that. And then find the volume control here and click that drop down. And where it says level, you should see over here on the right, this little option is like a diamond with 2 arrows next to it. If you click on that, you will have created something called a keyframe. You'll actually see it down here. It's a little keyframe here. Now, it's not going to make sense until you make a second one, so move your playhead over, make a second keyframe, and then if you go down here into your volume, you can actually move this around. So what this means is that here it's a little bit louder, and then it fades down like this.
There's one place in Des Moines East Village that can take your trip to new heights. Climb Iowa.
So I've kind of moved that up and down just like that. That's just a simple way to do some audio mixing. I'm not going to go too much into that, but that's a simple way you can do that. You can do that through all of your tracks as you need to. So basically, once you've done your color correction, and one thing I have not covered here is transitions. I don't think transitions are super necessary for what you're doing. I'm talking video transitions between clips. But if you want to add transitions, you can do that. Go to your effects panel, maybe close the search you had recently. You can go to video transitions, and there are tons of different default transitions you can add if you want to transition between clips. You're definitely welcome to do that. You're definitely welcome to have fun with that. And last, I want to show you if you recorded footage that is good for slow-mo. If you recorded footage in 60 frames per second, I want to show you how you can slow down that footage. You're going to need to open up your media folder. It's got all of your different camera angles in it. You're going to need to find the camera that you recorded slow-mo on. You can actually just click the drop down here. And if you recorded in 60 FPS, if you do this drop down where it says frame rate, you will actually see anywhere where you did anything that was 60 frames per second. You'll just see this frame rate option here. So most of the footage in this camera B folder was 30 FPS, but some of it was 60 FPS. It says 59.94. If I double click on it, I can see a preview of it. This footage was filmed in slow-mo. This footage was filmed in 60 FPS. That means it's possible for me to slow it down without losing any quality. So I'm going to find a good clip here. I'm going to show you how I can do that. But let me find a clip that would be good for slow-mo. A good slow-mo clip is going to be a clip where some action happens, where someone is doing something like this might make sense here. Let's find a clip that would make sense for that slow-mo. Yeah, something like this where there's some action. A lot of times human action works really well. I'm going to try to slow that down. I'm just kind of scrubbing through the footage here to find some footage that might work well to do in slow motion. This might work okay. This footage here is lovely, but let's find maybe this one here where I have some people moving. Yeah, I'm going to slow this clip down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the clip here so I can see it. And I'm going to find a place of action. I'm going to make in and out points just like I did with my rough cut. I'm going to do that. I'm going to then drag this into my sequence wherever I want it to go. Somewhere, let's say I've just thrown it in an empty space here. Then I'm going to find that clip and I can right click on it and I can choose this option here, speed and duration. And because I filmed this in 60 frames per second, but my sequence is 30 frames per second, I can slow this down by 50% without losing any quality. Just click OK. And now it's also going to slow down your sound, so you may want to turn down that sound all the way because that'll sound really silly. But I've been able to make this 60 frames per second without losing any quality. It looks slower, but it still looks smooth and easy to work with. So I've got my slowed down footage. I've turned that all the way down because that's going to sound really silly. That's just kind of a last bonus thing. So we have done color correction. We've done some sound editing and mixing. We've added lower thirds graphics. There are lots of other things that you can do. Of course, you can have lots of fun with this. But when you're done editing, let's talk about submitting this. You're going to save your Premiere project. Just go to File and then Save. And then go to your export window. This time you're going to export a new thing. It's going to be called, the file name is going to be your Climb Iowa KC Final Cut. So it'll be the name of your project, then your name, then Final Cut. Make sure to click on Location and make sure you choose that you're going to be saving into your exports folder. Now your exports folder is going to have two things, your rough cut and your final cut. You can click Save there. These things here, the match source and H.264 are fine. That's what you want to have. You'll click on Export to export that video. And then when that's done exporting, while that's exporting, you can go to your browser, find your Blackboard page for the class. I'm going to go ahead and get logged in here. You'll need to find our Video Production Lab Blackboard page, which is here. Going to find our Shared Files folder, and then find the folder for this project with your name on it for your group. You would go into your exports folder and drop your export into this folder here. Again, make sure you don't navigate away until you've added that. Then to submit the assignment, you'll go to week 15. And again, you can just submit a note letting me know you've completed the assignment. So the same way you submitted your rough cut is how you'll submit your final cut. Congratulations. Good luck.